Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. With Christmas just around the corner, I hope you're all having a calm, cozy, and safe holiday season. And if you're watching this on Christmas itself, Merry Christmas to you. Tonight's story from our No Sleep is a little different. It starts light, almost funny, but like all good horror stories, it doesn't stay that way for long. This is part one of a longer Christmas special, and it tells the story of what happens when a child accidentally writes a letter to the wrong holiday figure. Huge thanks to you/lifeisstrangemetoo for writing and sharing the story on our No Sleep. Sit back, relax, and let's get into some Christmas Reddit horror stories. It never ceases to amaze me how much trouble kids can get up to in the milliseconds a day you're not watching them like a hawk. One time I took a phone call in the other room for 2 minutes and came back to find my 3-year-old daughter had somehow stripped naked, opened a door, and used the front lawn sprinklers to take a shower. Kids, right? Still, I don't know what I'd do without her. She's just started kindergarten in the fall, and the days feel strangely quiet without her screaming. But just when my life was beginning to get peaceful, she managed to get up to trouble again. And this time the solution isn't as simple as keeping the sprinklers off. If I leave them on, she always seems to find a way out to the front yard. No, this problem is serious. It all started with Miss Frazzle. Miss Frazzle is the kind of woman who starts wearing Christmas sweaters with cat hair all over them at the beginning of November. And she decided that since her favorite holiday was merely a month and change away, she was going to have the students write letters to Santa Claus. Ordinarily, that would be fine, but as Miss Frazzle's teaching abilities don't quite match her enthusiasm for cats and candy cane flavored liqueur, the students' letters got sent out with some spelling errors. As far as I can tell, though, my daughter is the only one who sent her letter out to Satan instead of Santa. Ordinarily, that wouldn't be a problem, just another funny story to add to the highlight reel that gets told when the family gets together at Christmas. The problem is that we got a letter back. The envelope was black and smelled faintly of charcoal, and when I opened it, a piece of folded paper that must have been at least 500 years old fell out. I'll type the contents out here for you. Dear Sarah, thank you so much for your letter. Would you believe that almost nobody bothers to write to me anymore? Well, nobody except Satanists, and those guys are weirdos. I have carefully considered your request for a life-size, living and breathing teddy bear, and I believe that our doctors down here have been able to put together a reasonable approximation of what you want. Frank and Teddy scheduled to arrive shortly after you receive this letter. Yours truly, Satan. I must have looked rather stupid as I stood there staring at the letter in my hands, my mouth flapping open and closed like a fish as I tried to put my thoughts in order. But I wagered I looked even stupider when I turned around to see a 7-foot-tall teddy bear standing behind me, and I screamed like a little girl. Frank and Teddy seemed unfazed by my reaction, and really, I'm sure he's probably used to it. He was patched together with various bits of ragged cloth and covered in what looked suspiciously like bloodstains. One of his eyes was a little black button, and the other looked like a glowing ember set somewhere deep in the back of his head. He spoke in a booming, monotonous baritone that made me wonder if his vocal cords had been singed by hellfire. I am Frank and Teddy. I am here to love you. Oh, okay. Wow, I said, nodding my head vigorously until I realized I was nodding for no reason and stopped. Are you Sarah? Frank and Teddy boomed out. No, I'm Sarah's dad, I replied. Listen, I don't really think that... Where is Sarah? Well, she's at school right now, and... Then I will go to school so that I may love her. Wait a second. School is over now and she'll be home any moment, but you can't... Then I shall wait here, Teddy replied. Do you have any souls of the damned? He said. I need souls of the damned to sustain myself. No, I'm afraid we don't. Cheetos are also fine. Oh, well, we do have those. I'll help myself. I looked back down at the letter as Frank and Teddy wandered into my kitchen and saw that there was a customer service number written on the back. But before I could call it, I heard a scream behind me. I turned around and saw Sarah standing in the doorway, mouth hanging open as she stared at Frank and Teddy rummaging through our cabinets and throwing things on the floor in his search for Cheetos. "Now, Sarah, honey, don't be scared," I said. But Sarah shot past me and leapt on Frank and Teddy's leg, wrapping herself around it so that she was lifted off the ground whenever he took a step. "He's perfect, Daddy. I can't wait to take him to show and tell." "Wait, really?" I asked, flabbergasted. "Hold on, you can't bring a monster teddy bear up." "Are you, Sarah?" Frank and Teddy's booming voice cut me off yet again. "Yes," Sarah shouted. Frank and Teddy took a knee.
"My lady," he said, "I have been enlisted by the Dark Lord Satan to serve at your pleasure. I will love and protect you and tear your enemies to shreds if need be." "Cool," Sarah shouted, leaping to her feet and hopping around Frank and Teddy in circles. Not knowing what else to do, I typed the customer service number on the back of the letter into my phone with shaking hands. It rang once, and then a tired female voice answered. "Hell customer service, how may I hell you today?" Wait, did you just say, "How may I hell you?" The voice on the other end sighed. "It's not my joke. It's just something management forces us to say." Okay, I said. "Listen, I think there's been some sort of mistake." The woman sighed again. "Look, all heaven and hell placements are final. The appeals process is really more of a formality." "What?" I said. "No, I'm talking about the 7-foot-tall monster teddy bear that just showed up at my house." "Oh," the woman said, her tone relaxing a bit. "You must be the Rogers household." "Yes, that's right," I replied. "It's Satan wanted to let you know that he hopes your daughter enjoys the gift, but that sadly he'll be out of the office until next Wednesday, so he'll check back with you then." "Well, can I maybe return it until then?" "No," the woman said flatly. "So I'm stuck with a giant monster teddy bear until Satan calls me next week?" "No, of course not," the woman said. "Oh, thank God," I replied, somewhat regretting my phrasing. "Satan won't be calling you," she said. "He has you scheduled for a face-to-face appointment." A few croaking sounds escaped my throat as she asked me if there was anything else I needed, and when I couldn't answer, I heard her mutter something about how rude humans were before hanging up. I slowly turned around to see Sarah laughing with glee as Frank and Teddy tossed her up in the air and caught her over and over again. I'm not sure how I'm going to keep a 7-foot-tall monster teddy hidden from the rest of the neighborhood until Wednesday. Nor do I have the slightest idea what I'm going to do when Satan himself shows up on my doorstep. Right now, I only know one thing for certain. I'm gonna have to buy more Cheetos. It's amazing how open kids are to new experiences. When you're a kid, you can get excited about anything from cartoons and ice cream to giant monster teddy bears from hell. Basically, my 5-year-old daughter mistakenly wrote a letter to Satan instead of Santa. And well, I don't think Satan has a good grasp of what the kids are into these days because he sent her a 7-foot-tall Frank and Teddy in response. Now that you're all caught up, I'll let you in on the fiasco that's happened since my last post. After a very tense sleepover in which Sarah and Frank and Teddy watched cartoons and played patty cake, and I consumed a near-lethal dose of coffee, I decided that I had no choice but to send Sarah off to school and try to get in touch with Hell's customer service again. The line rang once, and the familiar voice answered. "Hell customer service, how may I hell you today?" "This is Darren Rogers again," I said. "Ah, Mr. Rogers," the woman said. "How are Sarah and Frank and Teddy getting along?" "Well," I said, "that's not really the point. I simply can't keep this thing in my house anymore. It doesn't even belong on this planet." Ahem. I turned to see Frank and Teddy standing behind me. "Oh, I stammered out. "I didn't mean you. I was talking about the pet hamster." "If the hamster is a threat to Sarah's safety, then I shall terminate it with the fury of a demonic legion." No, don't do that," I shot out quickly. "That is preferable," Frank and Teddy replied. "I find the hamster to be cute. I do not wish to obliterate it." I could feel my mouth hanging open. Okay. "Mr. Rogers?" The receptionist's stern voice came through the handset. "Yes?"
If you really insist that there's a problem with the teddy bear, Satan had a last-minute cancellation and I can get you an appointment today instead. Oh, I almost hopped with excitement. That would be great. When's the appointment? Now, she replied flatly. I'll buzz you 3 down. Down? What do you... But I was interrupted by a column of black and purple flames that erupted around me. I felt an intense sense of falling before landing with a dull thud on what appeared to be a giant blue beanbag in some sort of cave. I saw that there were 2 other beanbags present, one exceedingly large purple one that Frank and Teddy was sat on, and a small furry pink one that Sarah was sat on. My mind was numb as I scanned the walls of the cave around me. They were adorned with skulls of creatures that I'd never imagined in my wildest dreams. There was a rounded triangular one with huge eye holes and 3 small horns, and a tiny, perfectly spherical one with no features at all other than a mouth. In the corner of the office sat what can only be described as a taxidermied dragon's head. Sarah was staring around with the same look of wonder on her face she'd had when I'd first taken her to Disney World. At the opposite end of the room, there was a large, polished black desk that looked to be made of obsidian, behind which sat a normal-looking office chair. I didn't have to wonder why Satan wasn't there for very long, because a column of black and purple flames erupted behind the desk, and when the smoke vanished, the great demon was sitting in his chair grinning at us all as if we were honored guests he'd been expecting. He was red-skinned under his suit and had 2 large, polished black horns and a small, neatly trimmed goatee. "So," he began in a jovial tone, "welcome to hell. You know, I don't get many visitors down here, besides, people who go to hell, and they're generally not very nice." I saw out of the corner of my eye that Sarah had crawled into the dragon's head with Frank and Teddy, and they were having a tea party. Sarah, I don't think that you... Don't worry, Darren, Satan cut me off. The dragon is mostly dead. Satan seemed unfazed by my lack of eloquence. "As I understand it," he said, "you have some problem with Frank and Teddy." "You told me the problem was with the hamster, Darren," Frank and Teddy's voice boomed out from inside the dragon's head. I trailed off. "I am sorry for my outburst. I have not eaten today. You are out of Cheetos." "You ate 30 bags," I said weakly. "It's okay," Satan smiled, buzzing the intercom button on his phone. "Tina?" he said. "Yes, Mr. Satan?" The secretary's familiar voice came through. "Can you get Frank and Teddy 200 pounds of Cheetos?" 300 pounds, Frank and Teddy interjected. 300 pounds of Cheetos? Right away, Mr. Satan. Thank you, Frank and Teddy said, nodding his head. I require the proper amount of fuel to love Sarah and eviscerate the souls of the righteous with maximum efficiency. I tried to focus on Satan as a giant blue-skinned demon with bulging muscles and a hatchet sticking out of his head wielding a giant wheelbarrow full of Cheetos. We make them down here, Satan said, grinning. Now, Mr. Rogers, what issue is it that you have with Frank and Teddy? Well, I sputtered out, just look at him. He's a monster. A hush fell over the room, and I realized the blue-skinned demon was eyeing me like he wanted to hit me. We try not to use the M word down here, Darren, Satan said. It's okay, Fursnell, he added to the blue-skinned demon. He's from Earth. He doesn't know. Fursnell huffed and stomped out of the room while I once again tried and failed to make noises with my mouth. Darren, Satan said patronizingly. I'm surprised at you, judging poor Frank and Teddy by his appearance. You should know better than that. I mean, my daughter is cute as a button, and she's the one who put the hatchet in Fursnell's head. You have a daughter? I asked, dumbfounded. I have 700. Well, I said, trying to forget that Satan had just called me a racist, Sarah is my only daughter, and I just can't help but worry about her when there's a giant, undead teddy bear thing constantly around. I heard giggling and turned to see that Sarah had latched onto the back of Frank and Teddy, and he was pretending to not know where she was. I have been taken in by your deception, and am not aware that you are on the back of my head, he boomed. Satan leaned over on his desk, rested his chin on interlocked fingers, and put on an expression of deep thought. "I think I know what you mean," he said after a moment of reflection. "I know just what to do." "You do? Oh, thank God. Satan." Satan waved his hand dismissively and pushed the button on the intercom. "Tina," he said. "Yes, Mr. Satan?" The intercom replied. "Can you please send in Miss Hatchetface?" "Yes, Mr. Satan." Miss Hatchetface? You mean that giant blue, demon was a woman? What? No, we don't judge based on physical appearance here in hell, and we certainly don't base names on it, which is lucky for you, Mr. Big Nose. But seriously, I feel your plight, Darren, and that's why I'm going to set you up with my own personal nanny to watch over Sarah and Frank and Teddy while you're at work. But don't you worry, Darren, Satan exclaimed. Miss Hatchetface is wonderful. She did a great job with my kids. Well, not the first few hundred, but she got the hang of it eventually. Satan, Boom, boom, boom. The knock that interrupted me nearly knocked the door off the hinges. "Oh, that'll be Miss Hatchetface now," Satan said, rubbing his hands together. "You guys are going to get along great, Darren. Great." I didn't know what to say, and so I simply slumped my shoulders and mumbled out an, "Okay." Satan sprang up and opened the door, and I gasped as I caught sight of Miss Hatchetface, a petite, pink-skinned woman with a small button nose and glittering obsidian eyes. "Are you Mr. Rogers?" she asked, cocking her head to the side and regarding me with a look of curiosity. Satan leaned over and whispered in my ear, "She's half succubus," as I shook her soft, delicate hand. Miss Hatchetface's tail twitched. She giggled. "I've never met a human before," she smiled. "Are they all as handsome as you?" My mouth went dry, and I suddenly became very aware of how large and awkward my tongue felt in my mouth. "So," Satan clapped his hands together cheerily, "are we all set here?" I stared into Miss Hatchetface's deep, glittering black eyes, and before I knew what was happening, my head was nodding up and down of its own accord. "Great," Satan said. "Then I'll send you 4 back up." "I can't wait," said Miss Hatchetface before a column of black and purple flames swallowed us all. I was right back home in a rush of smoke, sucking in a deep breath of the clean, fresh air. I had almost forgotten what air smelled like without the overwhelming presence of sulfur. Miss Hatchetface landed next to me, and Frank and Teddy and Sarah landed across the room on the sofa, Sarah still clinging to the back of Frank and Teddy's head and giggling like mad. I took another deep breath of fresh air, and then another, and another. Soon I realized I was feeling quite a bit dizzy, and the room seemed to be tilting upwards. On second thought, no, I was falling. I felt someone's arms catch me, and looked up to see Miss Hatchetface looking down at me, before I felt my feet leave the ground, and I realized that she was carrying me. "Just lay down and relax," she said, placing me on the sofa next to Sarah and Frank and Teddy. "You've had a bit of a shock." I gasped out a reasonable approximation of the word thanks and sank down into the overstuffed leather cushions. But my rest was short-lived as I heard a knock at the door. Miss Hatchetface answered it with a bubbly "hi," but I couldn't see anybody there. Instead, she bent over and picked something up off the ground. "Oh, Mr. Rogers, you've gotten another letter from Satan." She handed the letter to me, and with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I opened it. "Dear Dan," your name is Dan, right? I'm really bad with names. I'm just going to assume that it's Dan, and if it's not, next time you're in hell, you can let me know. Anyway, the reason I'm writing isn't to ask your name, but to let you know that I went ahead and took care of your little Frank and Teddy problem. The solution is scheduled to be delivered shortly after this letter. Yours truly, Satan. My stomach sank. I had already had experience with 2 of Satan's solutions before, and I had gotten 2 demonic hellspawn as roommates out of the experience. My suspicions only deepened when a large moving van pulled to a stop in front of my house. What could be inside, I wondered. Was it a giant snake demon, an even larger demon teddy bear, a herd of evil unicorns? I didn't want to know, and since I was still feeling a little woozy, I asked Miss Hatchetface to check for me. She came back hauling a giant wooden crate that must have been 10 times her size, and set it outside the front door. "How do we get it in?" she asked me. I slowly shook my head. "Try the garage," I croaked out. "Oh, that's a good idea," she giggled, hauling the crate up as if it were full of feathers. I heard the sound of grinding metal come from the garage, and I quickly found my feet and rushed outside. I saw Miss Hatchetface half squatting, shoving the garage door up with her bare hands. She threw it into the open position and stood grinning with her arms crossed, admiring her handiwork. "Wow, that door was pretty heavy," she said. "Humans must be stronger than I thought." "There's a remote." "A what?" "Never mind." "Okay," she giggled. "We'd better get this crate inside and crack it open." My urge to be a gentleman and help her lift a crate was not quite as powerful as my urge to not get a hernia, so I let her move it in herself. When we had gotten it inside, she grabbed hold of one of the wooden sides and tore it off with such force that it hit the wall behind her and shattered into sawdust and splinters. "Oops," she giggled. "Sometimes I don't know my own strength. Hercules is a distant ancestor." "Right," I said, too preoccupied with the contents of the box to concentrate on what she had said. "Is that what I think it is?" I asked. "Oh, it sure is," she replied. "Wow, Satan was really like you. These are rare." Inside the box was a tangled mess of black branches and dark purple leaves. The leaves formed little spirals at the center of which rested large orange pine cone-shaped fruit. Only it wasn't actually fruit, it was Cheetos. I reached out and snapped off one of the Cheeto fruit, and a new one instantly sprouted out of the circle of dark purple leaves surrounding it. "So it's a Cheeto tree." "Yup." "Well, all right." I turned around to head back inside when I saw Sarah and Frank and Teddy ambling down the sidewalk hand in hand. Well, hand in paw. "Hey!" I shouted after them, sprinting as I tried to catch up. By the time I managed to get in front of them, I was out of breath and leaning over with my hands on my knees. "Where? Giant teddy bear? Neighbors!" was all I managed to gasp out. "I think he means you should go back inside so that the neighbors don't see you," I heard Miss Hatchetface's voice say from behind me. I nodded my head vigorously in agreement. "I cannot abandon my charge to the wild dangers of the suburban neighborhood," Frank and Teddy boomed. "I shall accompany her on her quest, no matter the danger, and together we shall go to the park and catch butter-flies." "They're called butterflies," Sarah giggled. "Butter-flies. That does not make sense. Are they flies coated in butter?" Sarah merely giggled in response. Miss Hatchetface, I think it'll be fine if we just get you a disguise first. Let's head back to the house and I'll put one together for you." "That is acceptable," said Frank and Teddy, "but it must be fearsome." "Of course," said Miss Hatchetface. Mr. Rogers, are you okay?" I was still too out of breath to answer her and simply gave a thumbs up in response. Right about then, I was really regretting my decision to replace the morning bike rides I used to take with coffee and donuts. "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Rogers, I can help you," Miss Hatchetface laughed, lifting me off the ground with ease. When we got back inside, Sarah and Frank and Teddy ran to play upstairs and Miss Hatchetface set me down on the sofa. "You just rest a while," she said, smiling down at me. "I think I saw something upstairs that would make a good disguise." "Yeah, okay," I replied. "I'll be here." Miss Hatchetface's hips swayed as she climbed the staircase. She paused at the top, and I quickly pretended to look elsewhere as she turned to look at me. She laughed and continued on upstairs. "What an idiot," I thought to myself. "She obviously knew you were checking her out. Who just stares at the wall?" I clicked on the TV and dozed off for a bit and woke up to Sarah shaking my shoulders. "Daddy, Daddy, look!" she squealed. Frank and Teddy had been draped in a giant mess of fabric that did in fact seem to disguise the fact that he was a giant demon teddy bear. The costume, however, was anything but fierce. It was bright pink and covered in a unicorn pattern, with lace at the bottom that brushed the floor whenever he moved. "Are those Sarah's curtains?" I asked. "Yeah," Sarah shouted. "Cool, right?" "Is it fearsome?" Frank and Teddy boomed. Sure," I replied. I looked pleadingly at Miss Hatchetface. "But why did you have to use the curtains?" I asked. Miss Hatchetface shrugged. "They were the only thing that was big enough," she replied. "Okay." "May we go to the park now and exterminate the flies of butter?" Frank and Teddy asked. "We're not going to exterminate them, just catch them," Sarah said. "I make no promises." "Yes," I said, "you can go to the park and catch butterflies, but I'm coming too." "Yes!" Sarah exclaimed. "I am also excited," Frank-N-Teddy added in. Miss Hatchetface? I asked hopefully. Sure, she replied. Let me just grab some Cheeto fruit for Frank-N-Teddy. You have Cheeto fruit? Frank-N-Teddy asked. Oh yes, Satan sent some over, Miss Hatchetface replied. I am exceedingly pleased by this information. Soon we were all on the way to the park, my trunk crammed to the brim with Cheeto fruit, me trying to keep my eyes off Miss Hatchetface in the passenger seat, while Sarah bounced around excitedly in the back seat with Frank-N-Teddy. When we got to the park, Miss Hatchetface and I sat on a bench and watched Sarah and Teddy play for a while with butterfly nets. So, Mr. Rogers, Miss Hatchetface began, turning those big, glittering black eyes towards me. Is there a Mrs. Rogers in your life at all? My tongue began to feel cumbersome and clumsy, as it always did when Miss Hatchetface looked at me with those eyes. No, not anymore, I managed to choke out. Really? What happened? She passed away shortly after Sarah was born. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring up something so painful. No, it's okay, I said. You didn't know. Let's change the subject, she said, her eyes shifting themselves to the ground. What do you do for a living? I'm a writer, I replied. Oh, really? That's so amazing. I think everybody's wanted to write a book at some point, but most of us never actually do it. Well, in a way, it was my wife's death that inspired me to start writing. Oh, really? How so? Well, stories have structure, I said. There's good guys and bad guys, and well, when bad things happen, they usually happen for a reason, like the character is being punished for something bad they did or something. But in real life, they just happen because they happen. I guess I just wanted a break from real life. I looked up to see Miss Hatchetface's big black eyes had grown moist around the edges. We stared at each other in silence for a moment. Then there was a scream, and the moment was over. We both jumped to our feet and rushed towards Sarah to see her sitting on the ground and crying, while Josh, the neighborhood bully, was pulling the wings off her butterflies and laughing. I saw a pink blur in my peripheral vision, and I realized it was Frank-N-Teddy as he scooped the boy off the ground by the back of his shirt and began to shout at him in his crackling baritone. You are not permitted to harm the Princess Sarah's flies of butter, he boomed out so loudly that Josh covered his ears with his hands. You will apologize to the Princess Sarah, and then I shall send you to hell forthwith so that you may be judged for your sins. Please, God, no, Josh shouted. God will not save you from the Dark Lord Satan. But Sarah did save him. She reached up and gently tugged on Frank-N-Teddy's paw and said, It's okay, Frank-N-Teddy. He's not worth our time. Just let him go. Frank-N-Teddy dropped Josh into a sobbing heap, and Josh wasted no time in dashing out of the park as fast as his feet could carry him, while Frank-N-Teddy called after him, The judgment in hell is not so lenient. Sarah stared down at the dead butterflies, and Miss Hatchetface covered her mouth. There is no greater honor than to die in battle, Frank-N-Teddy said. Yeah, I guess so, Sarah replied, sounding unconvinced. I believe that I have detected insincerity in your voice. Allow me to rectify the situation. Frank-N-Teddy bent down and picked the dead butterflies up in his hands, and a cloud of dark smoke swirled around them. And then, miraculously, they began to fly. Wow, Frank-N-Teddy, Sarah squealed. You brought them back to life. I have merely endowed them with the power of Satan, he replied. As I watched Sarah and Frank-N-Teddy playing with the newly revived butterflies, I realized that I'd been wrong to judge Teddy based on the way he looked. I realized that he wasn't bad at all. I realized that he could be just what this family needed. That is, until the butterflies started breathing fire. That's it for part 1. Huge thanks again to you/lifeisstrangemetoo for this story. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. Part 2 will be out on December 24th, and things only get stranger from here. See you soon and stay safe.